Peter Barnes is right there.
Okay. Thank you.
What's that?
I went from 3 to
Yeah.
a lot.
Hey, Peter, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
Once this gets rolling, when you start, I'm gonna turn up till this to you. That helps.
To her or to me?
I don't, I'm
I'll
good.
stand up there, whatever you
Yeah.
want. Yeah.
What do you want me to do?
What's
Stay
that?
here?
Hmm?
You want me to stay here?
What do you want to
I'm
do?
gonna stay here.
Hey, are you all right, sir?
Hey, how you doing? How you doing? See you all?
Yeah, I mean, we're done. Yeah.
You have to start the recorder.
You want to get set that up?
That's all right. I should learn how to do it.
Perfect. Okay. Right? Okay, everyone, it's 6:30. Gavel. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the agenda is pretty straightforward. Let me first say that we have a recording device here for the purpose of taking minutes. We're also streaming online, and that session will also be archived on Zoom. I have the articles of advertisement here in accordance with the Delaware County guidelines. So really, this is just us presenting a presentation that goes over specifically the tax increases from 2024 to 2025 as it pertains to the local taxes. And we expect there's going to be questions on that and probably some other questions. You know, we may not have all the answers today because your question might be about something that we have to research. So if we're not able to answer it in this session, we'll do our best to capture that and send that out separately. I think the presentation is going to be about half an hour. And I would say if we can wait till the end for questions, that'd probably be best. I'm going to try to open the podium. All right, so that microphone is on as well. Everybody's good? Perfect. Okay. We'll jump right into it then. Yeah, so the first thing is, for those that aren't aware of how we procure the real estate taxes from our residents, it's a function of a term called millage, which is taxing people at a percentage per $1,000 amount for their residents. So there's an example here on the slides that if it's a $100,000 home and the mill rate is 20 mils, then that tax bill would be 20 mils times the $100,000 home divided by 1,000. So that annual tax bill will be 2,000. So we're going to be talking about millage a whole lot. It's generally multiplied by your assessed value of your home and then divided by $1,000. So this is probably the biggest, I guess, most important slide that shows the impact and difference between 2024 to 2025. We are showing the entire tax bill. So that's the school, county, our local tax, and then trash fee if you have it. I also want to point out that I think this is all available online, and it's okay, Dr. Hass, it'll remain online, I'm sure. The other, I think, caveat I want to point out is the tax, this is an accurate approximation. So we're going to use an average assessed home rate. Your mileage may vary depending on your house's assessed value. Also, because of late tax receipts or maybe you don't get trash services, you might be impacted a little bit differently. But this is taking the average income that we receive by real estate taxes, divides it by the number of residences to kind of show that dollar value throughout the slides. So what we see here is we had rises across the board at school, county, and local. And I think that was really the impetus of having the discussion, is we know some residents were affected and concerned about it. And I think it probably wasn't covered in as great a detail as we would have liked in the budget meeting. So we're trying to go through and take the time for those folks that want additional information. So school millage went from 19.28 up to 19.63. So a small 1.8% increase on the school, although a much higher millage. Delaware County, we saw that 23% increase year on year to go from 3.14 to 3.873. And then, of course, our local tax went from just under a mil, 0.993 to 1.373 for a 38.27% increase. And we're going to talk about the entirety of that 38% through this presentation. So when we normalize all of those rates, for the resident, that's an adjusted average of 6.2% increase year on year from what you paid last year to what you paid now. For those that have trash services here, which is the majority of residents, but not all, we saw a significant increase going from $310 a year to $480 a year. Big increase. Still want to point out that's still less than $10 a week to get your trash and recycling removed. There's an asterisk in the upper category for Bethel tax millage, and we can see the breakdown of what that millage is comprised of below. So our general fund did not increase or decrease at all. We have this brand new EMS fund for emergency medical services, the 0.361 millage. The fire fund increased by 28% from 0.067 to 0.086, and then library stayed the same. So how does Bethel compare to the other municipalities within Delaware County? This wasn't a trick. It wasn't like, let's add a bunch of numbers so no one can see it. It is available online, but of the 49 municipalities, we have the 36th highest, or conversely, we have the 9th lowest millage in all of Delaware County. So what we see, and this is sorted by what they're calling all three utilities, all three authorities, which is the third column from the right. So it's looking at the county, school, and township tax or borough tax for each municipality. I think it's also important to note, of the 8 municipalities that have a lower millage than we have, 4 of them have a wage tax. They have a 1% earned income tax, right, that we don't have here. So if that were to be factored in, our ranking would be even more economical. So that's a lot of, maybe we don't directly relate to Upper Darby. So how do we look from the local perspective? This is looking at 3 adjacent areas, 3 different school districts, Vernon Valley, Pendelco, and Chichester. And in this set, where, again, the third lowest, we can see that there's a wage tax on all the municipalities that are above us, that are paying more. This particular graph also shows the 2024 numbers, so we can kind of see that percent change. So although a lot of the municipalities above us didn't change, they already had higher millages. Concord, directly below us, they also had an 18% local increase. And if you look at the stuff that the municipalities directly in Garnet Valley School District, the bottom three, we're seeing less than 1 mil difference between those. And really that statement below is the reason for that. When we're budgeting our resources, you're taking into account what we're receiving from real estate taxes as well as our commercial taxation. And in areas that have a lot of commercial properties, such as Concord, or the Wawa in Chester Heights, they have an ability to get a larger benefit from their commercial partners. So we don't have quite as many businesses, so a greater burden is pushed onto our residents. All right, so another thing that happens a lot, I think we're always increasing taxes till they ever go down. I'm going to try to make a sense of this chart here. And again, this is an approximation. The reassessment part is important. That's the law, which says that as we reassess properties, the township is not allowed to collect any more money than they collected before the reassessment. So in Bethel, if we're collecting 2.8 million a year in real estate taxes, after reassessment, we can only collect 2.8 million, which means that the millage rate will have to go down to get that same tax rate. So if we look at the example that we had before of a $100,000 home, let's say it was assessed in 2015 at 100,000 for 20 mills, and we were collecting $2,000 from that home. In the reassessment in 2025, and that house is now worth 200,000, the millage rate went down to 10 because the taxes collected is still 2,000. This isn't a direct case by case. We look at the entirety of the real estate portfolio within the township. So if there's, I don't know, let's say $1 billion worth of assessed homes in 2015 and it's 2 billion, we'll adjust the millage currently, but each person's going to have a different affected assessed value. If your property went up by 3 times and my property stayed the same as an assessed value, you will certainly pay more taxes as a percentage than I did. But in general, the millage goes down. So what happens is we don't collect more money. We collect the same money, but the value of the money goes down. As inflation continues and the cost of goods and services goes up, that $2,000 we collect is buying us less and less. And then at some point, we have to reassess, is a millage increase required again to keep up with inflation? And if that happens, then down the road, there's probably another reassessment. The millage gets pushed back down. So I guess it's fair to say we'll probably never collect less in dollars, but the purchase power of those dollars goes down. That's a big leap of faith, a lot on that slide. So I get it if we have questions on that. So this is taking one specific home that has an assessed value of about $380,000, which happens to be the exact average home value. It's important to point out that's not the real estate value of the home. So Rocket Mortgage posts every month, the sold home prices. So the average sold home prices in February of 2025 in Bethel Township was a little over $580,000. And the assessed value is roughly $380,000. Again, your individual mileage may change based on your specific information. But what this is showing is that in that same resident that lived in a $380,000 assessed value home was paying about $689 last year for their taxes and their trash services, and they would be paying about $1,002 this year. So that's roughly $300 increase for the average home that also has trash services. If you don't have trash, if you live in Foxfield or somewhere else, then you're probably seeing that increase around $150 year on year. The charts below spell that out exactly. So you can see the significant increase in trash on the left. General fund stayed exactly the same. This brand new significant charge for emergency medical. Even though there's a 28% increase in what we're asking for our fire tax, it's only affecting the average resident by about $8. And then library stayed exactly the same. Okay. So this is taking what I would see on my escrow statement or what you would see in your tax bill. So this isn't just the local anymore. It's our county and our school for that same $380,000 house in 2024. And we can see, obviously school is a large part, it's a great school district. And our county taxes are also much larger than the local. And then we have local broken out on the right, where you can see about half of it was in the general fund and half would have been in, just about half would be in trash, should you get trash. The next slide I'm going to get to will show 2025. So kind of take a look at this pie chart. We move to the next pie chart. Again, now we're seeing an overall increase from around $9,100 for this home to $9,900. There's an increase on the school side, increase on the county, of course, the increase on the local, and we can see that brand new orange wedge representing the EMS services. Okay, so this is just giving a different barometer if you have a $300,000 assessed home or $600,000 assessed home or $900,000 assessed home. This is that different value you might feel in your taxes depending on the assessed value of your home. Again, that 380 is kind of right in the middle of what we had discussed before, between the blue and the red. Another question that might come up is, well, okay, if EMS is its own fund and fire apparatus, and I'll be clear about apparatus, not all the fire expenses, but specifically fire trucks, they're their own separate funds, then what's actually in the general fund? So this chart's taking our budgeted items, and you could access our general fund approved budget for 2025 is available online, as is all the budgets for our liquid fuels, our library fund, our trash fund, all of that. So within that general fund, which is our largest fund, we can see that 36%, that bar on the far left, that's our police contribution. We're lucky to have such a great police force here in town. You know, we are on the smaller side of communities, but we get to boast having full-time police service. And that comes with a cost of 36% of our overall general budget. The next largest column is public works, is comprising 12.25%. So that's our roads. That's not only the highway staff, but also the road repair costs. We move down, we have our office staff within the township, full-time employees and their benefits. And then it starts to trail off. We go from those big three, which comprise about 60% of the overall budget. It's now everything's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. So MS4 is a big one, our stormwater improvements. That's only roughly over 2%, as is our Parks and Rec, which is comprising about 2.5% of the general budget. I guess I should point out, this is also our budgeted expenses. Revenue is a separate category, but how we have budgeted to spend our money, this is the breakdown. Okay, so now we're going to dive into those big three that are impacting the tax increase. The first is the trash fee. So for those that aren't aware, our contract ended at the end of 2024. So we went out and had an open solicitation for trash removal vendors. And we had 3 qualified bidders, and we're going to go through the bid evaluation process. The last bullet here is just important to note because no one wants to have to pay more. I don't want to have to pay more, but all of our bids were going to result in an increase. No matter which one we chose, we stayed with our incumbent or went with a different product, we were going to have to pay more because the cost to do that work has increased dramatically, not just here, but throughout the region. These are going to be pretty dense slides with a lot of charts and figures in them, but the point of this is we asked our vendors to provide us their bid 3 different ways. So a 1-year contract with 2 1-year options. The next one is a 2-year contract with 2 1-year options. And the last one will be a 3-year contract with 2 1-year options. In the very first option, JP Mascaro chose not to bid on that. So OptiKnocker, we can't quite see the value. It's hidden by P. Is there a possibility to move the image of the display for Peter? He is important, but he is covering up some of the, it will be on this side. Bill, I don't know if that can be moved. If not, I can probably pull up the slide here. It's okay.
I can stop it.
It's okay. It's actually, I have the number here. In the 1-year plus 2 1-year proposal, B&L was cheaper than OptiKnocker by $118,134, which is significant. Then as we move to the second item, JP Mascaro did provide a bid for that. We can see the prices in that total column in the very middle. But again, B&L, which was our incumbent, was cheaper than OptiKnocker. by now only $16,299. And then in the third scenario, which is, let me see if it advances. Yeah, 3 years plus 2, 1 year. Now it's flipped. Now OptiKnocker is cheaper than B&L by $206,808. So the longer the contract went, B&L had an initial lower cost, but that was eroded over time to where OptiKnocker was more affordable as the contract extended. The board had a difficult decision because we're looking to provide the best service, but be fiscally responsible. We chose to go with the 3 year plus 2 1 year alternative for the very reason that we see the table at the bottom. In every one of these conditions, trash collection service increased year on year, $50,000 to $80,000. So the intent was to try to lock in our vendor for as long as possible, because we presume in years 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's going to be increased even further. So our goal was to try to get us locked into making one trash fee adjustment that's going to stay constant for the next 5 years. Advancing the slide here. Perfect. Okay, we'll move to EMS. So the history behind this is, and there's a lot of text here. Traditionally, Crozier was providing advanced life services and ALS ambulance service for Bethel Township behind the township building, and they were doing it at zero cost. So they were making their revenue by billing the insurance companies for all of the ambulance services that they were picking up. In late 2023, before this current board was comprised, they had sent a letter saying that they weren't going to be able to offer that service beyond April 1st of 2024. So we had the same condition. We decided we were going to go out and solicit bids for emergency medical service providers. For some folks, they would say, well, did we even need to do that? Could we have just used joint assistance from our neighboring communities? I have the excerpt here from the second class township code. It's a requirement of a township like ours to provide EMS services. So we really didn't have a choice in providing that service. We could use the shared services in the interim while our new vendor was coming up to speed, but that wasn't going to be a permanent solution. So this is the bid opening for those 3 vendors that were qualified bidders. We had Crozier at $59,674 per month. Mainline Health was $41,109 per month, and Upper Tri was $40,080 per month. And so, as some of you know, we did go with Mainline Health. Certainly wasn't the highest. It was slightly above the lowest vendor, and there were a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is that Mainline Health was willing to house their ALS ambulance in Bethel Township, which was the same service that we'd had before. And we knew that was important to our residents, that we'd have our own dedicated service here for our residents. Upper Tri was going to house the ambulance not too far away, but it was going to be at the Ogden Firehouse. The second option, or the second reason that made Mainline attractive, was they were going to enter an agreement with us that was a multi-year agreement. So they were looking to give us a 3-year agreement where they were capping the escalation on that monthly value. Ironically, because we have, I guess, a somewhat healthy community, we don't have a very high number of events that would require an ambulance. So if you're in the ambulance business, we're not the most attractive customer, because you could go to another municipality and you're going to have a lot more traffic to claim the insurance against. So because of that, all of our bidders were entering these agreements and saying, hey, we may have to evaluate this, because if you're not giving us kind of a minimum level of customers, I hate to say customers, but you know what I'm saying, a minimum level of services, well, then there's a challenge, and we may not be economically viable, and we may need to increase the cost. That gave us pause, because if we were going to make a move to start an EMS fund, we didn't want to have to come back in a year or two and say, hey, they've increased the cost, therefore we're going to have to increase the millage. We were looking to have some control, because we knew this was, a big jump. So in 2024, we didn't feel that effect, because we had ARPA funds that we were able to reassign to cover when we were under Mainline Health. But going into 2025, we had to create a separate fund to provide, because the annual cost is something like, Stephanie's is something like $500,000. Okay, our overall budget this year of expenses is $3 million. So you can see that's a large chunk. We wouldn't have been able to absorb that in our general fund without incredibly quickly depleting our reserves. So the last item that was, and this again was a very high, not a high percentage, 28%, but a very small dollar amount increase. But just because there did seem to be some folks in the township that weren't exactly clear on what the fire apparatus tax does. Again, this is only for the vehicles. So all of their self-contained breathing, all their PPE, their training, all of their utility bills and upkeep on the fire building. That's all done by donations and their fundraisers. That's not something that we're, as a township, directly providing them funding for. But the question was, why do they need these vehicles so often? So again, on the right, NFPA, so National Fire Protection Association, Article 1901 gives the guidance on how often you're supposed to have these vehicles. And after 15 years, it's supposed to go from frontline service to being kind of a tertiary unit. And after 25 years, they're saying, hey, you might have been able to maintain it and upkeep it, but it really should be identified for retirement. So Bethel Hose, they employ a 21-year life cycle for their apparatus. So they have 3 fire vehicles and they're purchased on 7-year intervals. So after the first 14 years, it's no longer in frontline service. It becomes it's a backup unit or a specialty unit. And then after that 21st year, that gets transitioned out and that new 7-year starts for a brand new vehicle. I guess, well, so the argument would be, well, what was wrong with the amount of money that we were allocating before? So this is just different excerpts from websites, and the links were available on the bottom. I don't know if the links will translate on our Bethel Township, but certainly the URL would work. These are 3 different fire apparatus websites that are just explain different scenarios of why the cost is so expensive. Fenton Fire is over here saying that a completely tricked out truck is $2 million. When I talked to the Bethel Hose, they were saying a realistic number that we should be shooting for is about $750,000. Depending on whether you have, ladders or you have hose equipment, that price is going to vary. But when we were providing that lower millage, we were only providing them about $600,000 over that 7-year term. So we're trying to close that gap a little bit. When we go to our PSATs, which is the Pennsylvania State Association for Township Supervisors, there's a lot of smaller communities in the rural areas of Pennsylvania that are saying that they're no longer going to be able to have a local fire company because they're not going to be able to afford the cost of a new apparatus. So we're trying to get ahead of that and make sure that we have that in the future for Bethel Township. So I think the article on the far right, it makes a lot of sense where firefighter now is saying, how much do we think this truck will cost? It was a 2019 article saying that the cost of the vehicle would be $975,000, but that 7 years prior, that truck was only $500,000. So that was the increase. Whether that's supply chain issues, I can't recall. I just know that these things are skyrocketing. So that is the long version of why the taxes have been increased. And that concludes the presentation. I was going to go sit down and we can now take public comment. Yeah, I mean, switch that. So,
Nice presentation. Thank you. Appreciate it.
thank you. Usually if you get no questions, that means it was pretty dense, pretty boring. Like I said, we tried to get this up on Friday and that was feedback we were getting from the community to give everybody as much chance as possible to take a look at this. But if anything stuck out, you have an opportunity to look back at it. Again, I think you'll find that it's not going to be your exact case, but it's a normalization of what we're seeing across the entire community.
And just to be clear,
I'm sorry, and I have to say this, if you're gonna have public, you gotta come up and give your name and address.
Oh, sure. Hi, Kimber Schlaudweiler, 1376 Brookstone Drive. Just to be clear, and I'm 99% certain this is true, but the township millage and changes there are completely independent of the county and school millage rates. They're
Yeah.
handled completely separately. You do not have any impact on those.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, all of those organizations they're doing their bottoms up budget and then providing that for their own boards for approval. All I can say is that when there's changes to the county budget, sometimes might change some of the revenue that we collect for like liquid fuels or something like that. But no, it doesn't. Ours has no effect on theirs, or really vice versa. Yeah, please.
I'm Ed Deisher, 1108 Old Post Circle. It was a great presentation. Thank you. I don't know who put that together, but it was very, very helpful. Okay. My understanding, and maybe I've heard some rumors that with the trash contracts, the reason there was such a big increase is, I think number one was because of fuel costs in the last couple of years and dumping fees, I guess, in the last few years. Some people were saying that might just be a temporary situation. So is there anything in our trash contracts specifically that would give us an adjustment if fuel costs come down or if dumping fees come down, or are they just locked in for those prices?
Yeah, so I can answer some of that. So by nature, that 3-year +1 agreement would be if we felt like we were out of whack on the contract, we could go back out to bid. Tipping fees are not part of the bid from our vendors. We pay our tipping fees separately, but it is built into your overall cost. So we're paying that $900,000 a year to Optinocker. There's some other overage on that's the tipping fee. But Peter, I don't know if I've said that part correctly. I think I did. But and then Mike, to my knowledge, I don't think we have an opportunity to
No,
renegotiate.
it's just the option periods are
Yeah.
built in to handle that situation.
No,
So
that
So we're locked in for 3 years and
So we have a 3-year lock-in with two
2 1-year options.
1-year options.
2 unilateral 1-year options to the bench.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hey, Peter, I don't know if you're able, I know you're not feeling well, but if I did say anything incorrect about tipping fees, let me know.
I would. You were right on.
Okay. Never mind. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Well, with that, I think that concludes the meeting. I guess should I make a motion to adjourn?
You don't need one. There's
Oh,
one to it. It's an
okay.
information session.
That concludes the meeting then. If there's we'll stick around for a little bit if there's any other questions, but I appreciate everybody showing up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So long, everybody.